Okay, we are back on. So, chapter 19, like I said at the beginning, chapter 18, first part, 19, second, 20, third part, if it comes to doing the third part. So, in the third Chodesh, after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, on this day, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. For they set out from Rephidim and had come to the wilderness of Sinai, camped in the wilderness, so Israel camped there before the mountain. In Exodus 3:12 we read, and he said, because I am with you, and this is to you the sign that I have sent you. So to Moses, this is the moment that he's going to know that Yehovah sent him. When you have brought the people out of Mitzrayim, you are to serve Elohim on this mountain. So he says, this is the sign that you'll know that I've sent you. That's what we're seeing right here and now in Exodus 19. Verse 3 says, and Moshe went up to Elohim, and Yehovah called to him from the mountain, saying, this is what you are to say to the house of Yaakov, and declare to the children of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And now, if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a set-apart nation. These are the words which you speak to the children of Israel. So if you do this, you're going to be set apart to me. You're going to be a special people. Now, this piece of scripture is massively misunderstood by a lot of people. Okay, and that's the weight of what I'm going to look at in this part. I didn't know whether this was still a doctrine that people followed or not, whether it was even an issue. But like I say, I got an email when I was thinking about this, whether or not to include it in the Torah portion, or rather just after I decided not to include it, I got an email saying basically this is still a problem, and I was able to point to your teaching from 5 years ago, so thanks for the teaching. So this is still a problem, and I'll come to it and I'll address this. But if we understand what's happening to these people at the time that it's happening, they're being given this promise. If you want to be a treasured possession to me, you want to be a set-apart people, then you need to obey my voice and do my commands. And the same is true for us. We have this same promise made to us. Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and set before them all these words which Yehovah commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that Yehovah has spoken, we shall do. So Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yehovah, where it says, all that Yehovah has spoken. We've seen before this idea of the future perfect tense being used. In Hebrew, you only have an imperfect tense, something that hasn't been done, and a perfect tense, something which is spoken of as a perfect tense, something that has been done. What we would think of as the future tense, something that someone will do in the future, is spoken of in Hebrew as the perfect tense. So you can translate this, all that Yehovah has spoken, perfect tense has spoken, and understand it in the English past tense, or you can understand it as the statement in Hebrew can mean all that Yehovah will speak. Of course, to their minds, something that Yehovah will do in the future has already been done. We just haven't experienced it yet. So all that Yehovah has spoken or will speak, we shall do. So Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yehovah. So the verse says, if you diligently obey my voice and guard my covenant, then you shall be a treasured possession above all the peoples. However, we know that this was not what they did. They didn't obey his voice, and they almost immediately went astray after other things. And Yehovah kicked them out of the land, basically. So verse 9 continues and says, and Yehovah said to Moshe, see, I am coming to you in the thick cloud, so that the people hear when I speak to you and believe you forever. And Moshe reported the words of the people to Yehovah. So I'm going to come and speak so that they hear me speaking, so that they believe you forever, which puts me in mind, of course, of this verse, John 5:45-47. Do not think that I shall accuse you to the Father. There is one who accuses you, Moshe, in whom you have set your expectation. So the Torah, in other words. For if you believed Moshe, you would have believed me, since he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how shall you believe my words? Yehovah says to him, I'll speak to you so that they hear, they know that I'm speaking, and so that they believe you forever. So part of believing Moshe is this belief that it is Yehovah that is speaking, this true recognition that it is the word of Yehovah. People can say they think it's the word of Yehovah, but that is evidenced in their belief and obedience to it. And Yehovah said to Moshe, go to the people, set them apart today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their garments. So this is to kadash them, to make them holy, to set them apart. We'll get more into that as we go through the book of Leviticus. They're going to wash their garments, shall be prepared the third day. They're going to be ready for me to come down. In order for the physical presence of Yehovah to come down and be with the people, they need to be set apart. Just like Yehovah's physical presence is in the tabernacle, and in order to come into his presence, into the tabernacle, the priests have to set themselves apart, wash their garments, and be ready to come and serve Yehovah. Here the people are serving Yehovah on the mountain. He's going to come down to them, so they need to be prepared in the same way. They have to be made holy. For on the third day, Yehovah shall come down upon Mount Sinai before the eyes of all the people. And you shall make a border for the people all around, saying, take heed to yourselves that you do not go up to the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall certainly be put to death. Not a hand is to touch it, but he shall certainly be stoned or shot through with an arrow. Whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, let them come near the mountain. So this is actually pointed out to us in the book of Hebrews as the command that the people could not bear. Okay, Yehovah said, you're going to be stoned or shot through with an arrow if you come near the mountain. People can sometimes be a bit offended by Yehovah's word, by what he asks either of them personally or at how Yehovah's morality is not quite in line with their own morality. Moshe came down from the mountain to the people, and he set the people apart. They washed their garments. And he said to the people, be prepared by the third day. Do not come near a wife. So having sex makes you unclean. It is not bad. It's not sinful. Being unclean is not the same thing as being sinful. This is about being able to come near to the presence of God. So you are to become holy, set apart. You are to be prepared for Yehovah to physically be near you, like he was physically near the priests in the temple. So do not come near a wife. And it came to be on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mountain, and the sound of a ram's horn was very loud, and all the people who were in the camp trembled. They were actually in fear. They heard this tremendous thing, saw these tremendous sights. Leviticus 15:31 illustrates for us this point of being unclean and why we are not to be unclean if Yehovah is dwelling in our midst in a temple, which of course he's not at the moment. So being unclean is not relevant to us. It's relevant if you're going to be near Yehovah. So verse 31 says, thus you shall separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, set them apart, lest they die in their uncleanness when they defile my dwelling place, which is in their midst. So they had Yehovah's house that was built for Yehovah to live in. Physically on the earth, he was in the temple, and they weren't to be unclean in case they defiled the dwelling place of Yehovah and that they died in their uncleanness. Okay, so they weren't to be unclean. For us, it's a bit of a tragedy that we don't have Yehovah dwelling in our midst, but since we don't, the prohibitions against certain things, or the be aware of being clean and unclean commandments, aren't ones that we have to pay attention to, because he's not dwelling in our midst. Verse 17 says, and Moshe brought the people out of the camp to meet with Elohim, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. And Mount Sinai was in smoke, all of it, because Yehovah descended upon it in fire. And its smoke went up like the smoke of a furnace, and all the mountain trembled exceedingly. And when the blast of the ram's horn sounded long and became louder and louder, Moshe spoke, and Elohim answered him by voice. So Elohim has physically come down here. You can hear the sound of the ram's horn, the shofar, blasting. Moshe speaking, and Elohim is answering him. This would have been quite the thing to behold. Yehovah came down on Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain. Yehovah called Moshe to the top of the mountain, and Moshe went up. And incidentally, as we'll see, we are told that us having the word of Elohim and having been cleansed by the blood of Yeshua and being invited to his assembly should be of greater esteem to us than this was to them. They thought it was amazing because they could see it all happening, but we have the very word of the living Elohim. Yehovah said to Moshe, go down and warn the people lest they break through unto Yehovah to see, and many of them fall. So Yehovah knows what they're like, and he says, look, if they're going to touch the mountain, then they're to die. Go down and warn them, because I don't want them to die. I know what they're like. They want to break through, see Yehovah, but go down and warn them so that that doesn't happen. Verse 22 says, and let the priests who come near Yehovah set themselves apart too, lest Yehovah break out against them. So notice here that there's priests that are mentioned well before we have priests in the tabernacle that Yehovah instructs. And Moshe said to Yehovah, the people are not able to come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, make a border around the mountain and set it apart. And Yehovah said to him, come, go down, and then come up, you and Aaron with you, but do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to Yehovah, lest he break out against them. Okay, so Moshe says, no, it's fine, we've made the border. And he says, no, go down and warn them. When you come back up, bring Aaron with you. Moshe went down to the people, and he spoke to them. Now in 1 Peter 2, verse 9, I'll show you this because this is a misunderstood scripture. Like I said, when it said to them, you're going to be a set-apart people, you're going to be a treasured possession, you know, you're going to be priests to me, people misunderstand that. And the doctrine that people are often led astray into, we looked in the first part at doctrines of men and about how they can lead us astray into wrong worship of Yehovah. The doctrine, in a nutshell, is we're all priests to Yehovah. The Levites used to be the priests to Yehovah. Aaron was the high priest of the Levites. Now we have a high priest who is Yeshua. He is called after the order of Melchizedek. The order of Melchizedek is like an order of priests, like you'd have an order of knights. So that's the priestly order to which Yeshua belongs. Yeshua is our high priests. We are called priests. Therefore, we are the priests of the order of Melchizedek, because that's Yeshua's priesthood. That can kind of, on first blush, sound like it's credible, because we read in 1 Peter 2:9, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a set-apart nation, a people for a possession, that you should proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Okay, so we are priests. Hebrews 5:8-10 says, though being a son, he learned obedience by what he suffered. Having been perfected, he became the causer of everlasting deliverance to all those obeying him. Having been designated by Elohim a high priest according to the order of, Hebrew word is Melchizedek. Okay? So we are priests. He's our high priest. He's called after the order of Melchizedek. Therefore, are we priests in the order of Melchizedek? Is there even an order of Melchizedek? In Revelation 1:4-6, we also read, Yochanan, to the 7 assemblies that are in Asia, favor to you and peace from him who is, who was, and who is coming, Yehovah, and from the 7 spirits that are before his throne, and from Yeshua Messiah, the trustworthy witness, the firstborn from the dead, and the ruler, in other words, he's the first fruits of the resurrection, the ruler of the kings of the earth, to him who loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood. Okay, so Yeshua Messiah is a king. We are also kings and priests. Has made us kings and priests to his Elohim and Father, to him be esteem and rule forever and ever. So he's made us kings and priests. The word Melchizedek means, actually most strictly it means, my king is righteous. Okay, Malki, when you have the yod on the end of words and it becomes E, that means it's possessive. We would put an apostrophe to make something possessive. Malki means my melech. Melech is king. Malki is my king. Sedek, the is implied, so my king is Sedek, or my king is righteous, is what it really means. But they look at this word and they say Malki means king. Actually means my king, but whatever. They say king, Melech. Sadiq, from Sedek, righteous. King of righteousness is how they translate it. So they say we are kings and priests. Melchizedek was a king. He was the king of righteousness, and he was also a priest, we're told in Genesis 14. So they say the first person who was a king and a priest was Melchizedek. It's actually an error, but that's where they get that idea. Now we are kings and priests. Yeshua is high priest in the order of Melchizedek. He was the first king priest. Now we are under Yeshua. We are priests. So we must also be in the order of Melchizedek. You can see how they reason these things. In Exodus 24, 7-11, we're going to read, it says, and he took the book of the covenant and read in the hearing of the people, and they all said, all that Yehovah has spoken we shall do and obey. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, see the blood of the covenant which Yehovah has made with you concerning all these words. Moshe went up, also Aharon, Nadav, and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Yisrael. They saw the Elohim of Yisrael under his feet like a paved work of sapphire stone, like the heavens for brightness. Yet he did not stretch out his hand against the chiefs of the children of Yisrael. And they saw Elohim, and they ate and they drank. And we get an example, certainly from one of the people who teaches this doctrine, we get the example given to us that when a covenant is made in Scripture, they always eat a meal to ratify the covenant. That's what he'll say. That's a great example of when somebody tells you something that is not evidenced, it is not sourced, and yet they'll just tell you it as a historical fact. When they made the covenant, they ate a meal. That's not true. We don't see it every time in Scripture when a covenant is made. And yet this is an idea which is given to us. So what the people who believe this will say, so that we can understand their doctrine, is that we don't have to keep the book of the law. Okay, the book of the law is a curse. We don't keep that anymore. What we keep is the book of the covenant. And what these people were doing here is they were agreeing to only keep the book of the covenant. In this, we need to understand the difference between covenant and law. We make covenant with Yehovah. In the new covenant, the law, which is separate to the covenant, is written on our hearts. They said, all that Yehovah has spoken or will speak, as perfect tense, all that Yehovah will speak or has spoken, we shall do and obey. So they're agreeing this is the covenant that they are making. Okay, so the covenant that they make is that they will do what Yehovah commands them. That's the covenant that we make as well. People confuse the old covenant to be the law. It's not the law. The old covenant was an agreement to follow the law, as is the new covenant. So what they say is, what we follow is everything in Exodus up to this point, because that's what they agreed to. Then they had the sin of the golden calf, and then they had to have priests added to them, and they had to have the book of the law added to them as a punishment. So the law is a punishment that's added to them. We don't have to do that. We do up until this part. But if we go on to the next verse, it says, Yehovah said to Moshe, come up to me on the mountain and be there while I give you tablets of stone and the Torah and the command which I have written to teach them. So they're told after they agree, all that Yehovah has or will speak, we will do. Yehovah says, okay, now come up and I'll give you the things that you're to teach them. Okay, so this was not added as a punishment. The Torah is a blessing. It's always described as a blessing all the way throughout the Scriptures. It wasn't a punishment because of the sin of the golden calf. I would, like I said at the beginning, I don't want to so much go through a doctrine and destroy it point by point. Okay, that's fair enough. If you've got somebody who comes along and they're teaching something which is false, it's fair enough to go through and point out where it's false, where what they're saying is wrong. That is useful, but it's not what I'm going to do now. What I'm going to do is teach the truth about the order of Melchizedek and what the Scriptures actually say in context about us being priests and about Yeshua being priest after the order of Melchizedek. For people who have been interested in this doctrine, thought there may be a doctrine that contains truth, I would say to go to our YouTube channel. Okay, you go to playlists here at the top. Go to playlists, you'll see this. If you scroll down, you'll see at the bottom a playlist of 3 videos called Melchizedek's Priesthood. Okay, that's 3 videos. They're about 5 hours of teaching, going through somebody who is teaching this doctrine, their video, going through it point by point and saying, well, this isn't so, and showing you from Scripture why that is the case. That may well be useful to you. We know that the idea that not keeping the book of the law in the future when his people turn back to him, we know that this idea is false because of this passage. Verse 5 of Deuteronomy 30 starts and says, and Yehovah your Elohim shall bring you to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it, and he shall do good to you. So what he'll be doing at this point is doing good to his people. Okay, this is when they come in repentance and he brings his people back to the land of Israel. He shall do good to you and increase you more than your fathers. And Yehovah your Elohim shall circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed to love Yehovah your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, so that you might live. And we're going to be told what that looks like. Yehovah your Elohim shall put all these curses on your enemies, on those who hate you, who persecuted you. So these are all the curses which are found for disobedience to the Torah. You shall turn back and obey the voice of Yehovah, do all his commands which I command you today. Yehovah your Elohim shall make you have excess in all the work of your hand, in the fruit of your body, in the fruit of your livestock, in the fruit of your ground, for good. For Yehovah turns back to rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your fathers. So you're going to repent, you're going to turn back. Yehovah is going to turn back to doing good to you. That's going to happen under a set of conditions, okay? If you obey the voice of Yehovah, your Elohim, to guard his commands and his laws, his chukim, which are in this book of the law, in this book of the Torah. Okay, so if we do that, he will gather us back to the land. So the idea that the book of the Torah is a curse, it's something that we're not to follow, is actually the teaching of Christianity. What people have begun to do, and when I first did that video, going through the guy who was teaching, I had several members of that guy's fellowship get in touch with me and explain a little bit about the history of this doctrine, where it had come, why that guy started teaching it. And it had come from the writings of a man who had come up with this doctrine, and he had gone and approached several Torah teachers at the time to try and get them to follow after that doctrine and after that teaching. And he had been successful with the guy that I was talking about in that video. Okay, so this is a doctrine of men. He'd begun to teach it. I actually was in touch with him when that video went out. He watched the video and got back to me because of it. So it wasn't something that was done in slander, but it's absolutely false that the book of the law is a curse. As I say, it's a teaching that's come from Christianity, and it's the writings of a man who was struggling with what Paul says in Galatians and the Torah. So we were saying there's got to be some middle ground here. If the Torah is good, but Paul says that it's bad, which Paul does not say, that's a misunderstanding of doctrine that comes from the Christian church, then there must be some middle ground. And he was saying, you don't want to go into lawless Christianity and have no law, and you don't want to go into rabbinical Judaism with all of their false teachings. But that was a false dichotomy, because that's not the choice that we have. Okay, we are given the book of the Torah as a blessing. We don't have to go into rabbinical Judaism and listen to the teachings of man. We just stick to the Torah. So absolutely this verse tells us in no uncertain terms that we will come back and we will follow the book of the law in the future if you turn back to Yehovah your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul. That is, to follow the book of the Torah. So if on the earth we have the tabernacle, okay, and in the tabernacle we had a high priest. If we had the tabernacle or the temple in our midst, we would have a high priest that served in the tabernacle. We don't. When Israel was kicked out of the land, all of that was destroyed. Okay, so Aaron originally was the high priest in the temple on the earth. His sons after him and his lineage were the people who served as priest and high priest, and that was on the earth. If that was on the earth, that person would be our high priest. as we've seen, they were to be a nation of priests. And we'll come at the end to what being a priest actually is. But to all of those people, Aaron was their high priest. Without them serving in the tabernacle, they didn't have to go in there and minister as priests in the tabernacle, but Aaron was their high priest. Just as for us, Yeshua is our high priest, but that doesn't mean that we're serving as priests with him as our high priest. So Aaron was their high priest, and there were those who served in the tabernacle or in the temple, and they were the Levites. The Levites were the ones who did the service of the tabernacle, the service of the house of Elohim. He had Aaron and his sons doing the priesthood. They were the ones who gave the animals. Then you had the Levites who served in the tabernacle, who did things like putting the showbread on the tables, on the table of showbread, or burning incense, those sort of things. So that's what the Levites did. So you've got Aaron, and then you've got a specific lineage of people who are the Levites. In heaven, we have Yeshua. He's our high priest. But obviously, as priests, we don't serve in the heavenly tabernacle. What the people who believe in this doctrine are becoming confused by is the idea that we are priests in the same way that the priests in the earthly tabernacle were priests. They're not making a distinction between the earthly tabernacle and the heavenly tabernacle. In the book of Exodus, we're told that the earthly tabernacle was patterned after the heavenly tabernacle. It was a copy of the heavenly tabernacle. In the book of Hebrews, which we're going to see that Yeshua is high priest in the heavenly tabernacle, not in the earthly tabernacle. So Yeshua, and then we've got ministers that minister in the heavenly tabernacle. And we're told who those people are in Scripture as well. In Hebrews 1:4, it says, are they not all serving, is the translation here, serving spirits? And this is speaking of the angels. The word there is liturgikos. Liturgikos, serving. Okay, liturgikos, okay, is the Greek word relating to the performance of service employed in ministering. So sometimes you see ministering spirits said of the angels, but this word is this Greek word used in the New Testament is a word which refers to service in the tabernacle. So in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, we see this. They shall take all the instruments of liturgikos. Okay, so this is talking about in the tabernacle, all the instruments of service. His angels are spirits who do this service. Where did they do it? We're going to see scripture that shows us that. They do it in the heavenly tabernacle where Yeshua is high priest. With which they shall liturgeo, which is the verb form, in the sanctuary. Numbers 4:26, all the curtains of the court, talking about the tabernacle, which were on the tabernacle of the witness, and the appendages, and all the vessels of liturgikos, that they liturgeo with. So again, it's all about the service of the tabernacle. Take of them, and they shall be for the works of services of the tabernacle of witness, and thou shalt give them to the Levites, to each one according to his liturgia, okay, his ministration. So the angels are spirits that liturgeo, okay, they minister in the same way that the Levites were in the earthly tabernacle. Here in Revelation 8 verse 3, we're going to see an angel performing this ministry in the heavenly tabernacle. Another angel came and stood at the altar holding a golden censer. Much incense was given to him that he should offer it. Okay, so we see him doing this service, doing this ministry, or this liturgeo, whatever you want to call it. We see them doing this in heaven, standing at the altar in heaven, offering this incense. In Revelation 15, 5-6, it says, "And after this, I looked and saw the dwelling place of the tent of witness in the heaven was opened." So there was one on the earth that was patterned after the one in heaven. The ones who went into the one on the earth were the priests and the ones who were ministering, the Levites. Here we see this tabernacle opened in heaven. Out of the dwelling place came the 7 angels who had the bowls in their hands, the bowls of wrath. So who would be coming out of the tabernacle on the earth? Well, it would only be the Levites and those who have been set apart. Who is it that's coming out of the dwelling place? It's the angels. These are the constant themes that we see whenever these things are mentioned. So Yeshua, high priest, in the heavenly tabernacle where the angels do ministry or service. Now we have the book of Hebrews. It's important for us to understand that the letters of the New Testament were letters that were written to certain people. The letter to the Galatians was to the people in Galatia. The letter to the Romans was to the people who were under the Romans, those who were Roman citizens. The letter to the Hebrews is a letter to people who were Hebrews. And what we have explained in the book of Hebrews, to sum it all up, is that Yeshua is a high priest. Now, to the Hebrews who are used to reading the scriptures, they would say, Yeshua can't be high priest. He's not of the lineage of Aaron, so he can't be high priest. How does that work? So in the letter to the Hebrews, what is being explained to them is things that they would understand, things to do with the tabernacle and service. So in Hebrews 1:4-8 we read, "Having become so much better than the angels, he has inherited a more excellent name than them. For to which of the angels did he ever say, 'You are my son, today I have brought you forth'?" So Yeshua was not an angel. That is a doctrine that is taught some places. "Brought you forth, and again, I shall be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. And when he again brings the firstborn into the world, he says, 'Let all the angels of Elohim do reverence to him.' And of the angels indeed, he says, 'Who is making his angels spirits and his ministers a flame of fire.'" Okay, there's that word again. "But to the Son, he says, 'Your throne, O Elohim, is forever and ever. A scepter of straightness is the scepter of your kingdom.'" Okay, so the way you govern your kingdom is by straightness or righteousness, however you want to translate that. But he's told that part of the Psalm 86, which says, "Your throne, O Elohim, is forever and ever." We're told that is said to the Son. Exodus 28:1 says, "And you, bring near Aharon your brother and his sons with him from among the children of Israel for serving as priest to me." Okay, so here we see the priests ordained. So we've got Aaron and his sons in the position of the priests. And we've got the Levites ministering, which is Yeshua and the angels. Leviticus 8:14-15 says, "Thus you shall separate the Levites from among the children of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. Then after that, the Levites shall go in to do the service in the tent of appointment, or the tent of assembly, or the tent of meeting, when you have cleansed them and waved them as a wave offering." So they're set apart. You've got to be set apart to go into the tabernacle. Just as the angels are set apart, the holy angels are set apart to minister in the set apart place in heaven. In Leviticus 8:19, we're told, "I have given the Levite as a gift to Aharon and his sons from among the children of Israel." Just as Yeshua is above the angels, and the angels are to do service in the tabernacle in heaven. So on the earth, high priest Aaron, Levites given to him to serve. In heaven, we've got Yeshua, high priest, and as we saw, the angels. So Yeshua is our high priest, but that doesn't mean that we are priests serving under Yeshua. Okay, as in we don't go to the heavenly tabernacle and start doing service and doing sacrifices and whatever else it is in that tabernacle. Yeshua can be our high priest, just as Aaron could be their high priest, without them ever having to serve in the tabernacle and without us ever having to serve in the tabernacle. His function to us is as high priest. And we'll understand that from the book of Hebrews. For doubtless, he does not take hold of angels, but he does take hold of the seed of Abraham. So in every way, he had to be made like his brothers in order to become compassionate and trustworthy high priest in matters related to Elohim to make atonement for the sins of the people. So again, this is what's happening in heaven, not what's happening on the earth. But Yeshua had to be in every way like his brothers, the seed of Abraham. In other words, he had to be flesh and blood. For in what he had suffered, himself being tried, he is able to help those who are tried. Okay, so he was born in the flesh. He had the lusts and desires of the flesh. He was in every way like we are, apart from sin. Okay, so he had the temptations that we have, but he didn't sin. He was the example to us. Hebrews 3 verse 1 says, therefore set apart brothers, partakers of the heavenly calling, closely consider the apostle and high priest of our confession, Messiah Yeshua. Hebrews 4:14 to 15, therefore since again we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Yeshua, the son of Elohim, let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have as a high priest, unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who was tried in all aspects as we are, apart from sin. So he was the word of Elohim, which was Elohim, the word made flesh, along with the lusts and desires of the flesh. He was tried in all respects as we are, apart from sin. So he had the same trials, he had the same temptations in his flesh, but he did not sin. So our high priest had to be born in the flesh, as Yeshua was, to be able to sympathize with us. Hebrews 5:1 to 10 says, for every priest taken from among men is appointed on behalf of men in matters relating to Elohim to offer both gifts and offerings for sin. So that's talking about the priests taken from among men, those who are in the earthly tabernacle. Being able to have a measure of feeling for those not knowing and being led astray, since he himself is surrounded by weakness. So that's talking about human priests. It's saying human priests are just like you. And it's saying that's what Yeshua is like as well. So the priests taken from among men to do these things, they are in sinful flesh. On account of this, he has to offer for sins, that's human earthly priests, as for the people, so also for himself. So that's talking about an earthly priest, not about Yeshua, because obviously Yeshua didn't offer for his own sins, because Yeshua was without sin. Verse 4 says, and no one obtains this esteem for himself. So the priests on earth didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a priest when I grow up. No one obtains this esteem for himself, but he who is called by Elohim, even as Aharon also was. So those who are called by Elohim were those who were Levites, those of that particular genetic descendancy, just as Aaron was. Aaron was a Levite, where he was a son of Amram, and all of the people who were going to be priests had to be in Aaron's lineage. So not just a Levite, also of Aaron's lineage. That's how you got to be a priest. You didn't just get to say, I'm going to be a priest. So also the Messiah did not extol himself to become high priest. So again, this is explaining to the Hebrews, who are very familiar with this system of priests being Levites. It's explaining to them how Yeshua can be a priest. It says, so also the Messiah did not extol himself to become high priest, but it was he who said to him, you are my son, today I have brought you forth. As he also says in another place, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. So this is how Yeshua became priest, by an oath from Yehovah. He swore an oath to him, saying, you are to become a priest. He says, you are my son, today I have brought you forth. So the one saying these things is the Father. He's the one who says, you are my son, today I have brought you forth. And he says to him, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. May as well explain now what after the order of something means. Okay, very simply it means in the same way as something else was done. In like manner, you might say. So it's not talking about an order of priests. That's not what the Greek word used here means. And it's not what the Hebrew word in the passage that the Greek is quoting from means either. It means after the pattern of, in the similitude of, in like manner to something. So Yeshua is a priest forever in the same way that Melchizedek was a priest. Melchizedek was a priest long before we had priests in the earthly tabernacle. So it is possible and, according to Torah, lawful for there to be a priest that is not a Levite. So Yeshua is a priest in the same way that Melchizedek was a priest. Yeshua is not a priest in the same way that Aaron was a priest. So Yeshua never had to be of the lineage of Aaron. This would have been a massive problem for the Hebrews, who are told explicitly in the Torah, to even go into the tabernacle, you have to be a Levite. To be a priest, you have to be a son of Aaron. So this letter to them is explaining how those things can be. Who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and petitions with strong crying and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and was heard because of his reverent fear, though being a son, he learned obedience by what he suffered. That doesn't mean he didn't know how to be obedient. It means that through his suffering, he was actually acting out obedience. He was learning the real meaning of obedience, is a way that we might phrase that. Having been perfected, he became the causer of everlasting deliverance to all those obeying him. So again, this is an explanation to the Hebrews. Having been designated by Elohim a high priest, according to the order of Melchizedek. Again, in the way that Melchizedek was a priest, Yeshua was a priest. And this was promised to him in the scriptures that you, the Hebrews, already have. Hebrews 7 verse 11 says, truly then, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people were given the Torah, why was there still need for another priest to arise according to the order of Melchizedek? Again, this is written to the Hebrews who had priests, who may well have said, well, why do we need another priest to come after the order of Melchizedek? We've already got the priests who come after the order of Aaron. Why do we need another priest? So why was there still need for another priest to arise according to the order of Melchizedek? and not be called according to the order of Aaron. Okay, so to not be called in the same way that Aaron was. If the order of Melchizedek was a priestly order, then the order of Aaron would be a priestly order too. But the order of Aaron isn't the name of a priestly order. When we understand what after the order of actually means in the same way as, then we can understand what's being explained to them. Not some kind of mystical thing of, you're all priests and you're in this special spiritual order known as the order of Melchizedek. No. What's being explained is, Yeshua is a high priest. Why did we need another priest to be risen like Melchizedek was, instead of just another priest in the order of the son of Aaron? Well, they go on to explain. We should understand what priesthood is. Okay, Leviticus 16:32 says, the priest who is anointed and ordained to serve as priest in his father's place. So this is after the order of Aaron. In his father's place, you would be anointed to serve as priest. That's how the priests were in the order of Aaron. Why did we need another priest? So yeah, we should understand what priesthood is. The word translated priesthood here is hierosine. Okay? Priesthood or the priestly office. We tend to think of priests or of priesthoods like we might have an order of monks. We might have an order of knights. An order of monks contains monks. An order of knights contains knights. Makes sense that an order of priests will contain priests. Okay, so then you can make the leap of logic to the order of Melchizedek contains all the Melchizedek priests. Make that leap in the English. But if you think rather, you can have an order of knights that contains knights, or you can have a knighthood. Okay, and your knighthood would be the things that would be required of you as a knight. Okay, so if I said, Charlie has been knighted, his knighthood consists of going to feasts and drinking tea, then that would be Charlie's knighthood. What would be expected of him as a knight? His dealings as a knight. Okay, that would be his knighthood. Same with the priesthood. Your priesthood is what you do as a priest in your priestly office. You could say your priesthood was to go to the temple every day and to do X, Y, and Z. That would be what your priesthood is. So if truly then, if perfection was through the Levitical priesthood, the servings of the Levitical priests, for under it were people given the Torah, why was there still need for another priest to arise according to the order of Melchizedek, not be called like Aaron was? For the priesthood being changed of necessity, a change comes of the Torah. Okay, this is how it's translated. This verse is the cause of consternation for many people, and we'll still get emails asking me about this verse. Okay, a change comes of the Torah. Does this mean that the Torah, which is eternal, has changed in some way? Yeshua now being high priest after the order of Melchizedek, does that mean that the Torah has to change? You could read the English words here and think so. But the Greek word that's used here, it comes of the Torah, is in Greek, ek, the Torah. So what does ek mean? Okay, it says here, a primary preposition denoting origin, the point whence action or motion proceeds from or out of. So when it says a change comes of the Torah, it's saying that the Torah is the place that this change comes from, which makes perfect sense when we're considering Melchizedek was a priest in the Torah. So the change to allow Yeshua to be priest, or the change of priest to Yeshua, comes from the Torah as well. That word means that's the point where it's coming from. So we can see how it's used in the Bible here. Out of, from, by, away from. So we can clarify by rather saying, for the priesthood being changed, of necessity, a change comes out of the Torah. That's the place that the change comes from. That's necessary for us to understand. Because if we think that the Torah can just change here, there, and everywhere, then it is not permanent. And we can start saying, well, Yeshua fulfilled this, and then this part of the Torah is done away with. And the justification people use for making changes like that is this verse. But if we can understand that's not what the Greek means, it means that the change came from within the Torah and came out of the Torah, then we get a proper understanding. For he of whom this is said belongs to another tribe from which no one had attended at the altar. For it is perfectly clear that our master arose from Judah, a tribe about which Moshe never spoke of concerning priesthood. So this is the problem that they're concerned with. Yeshua was from the tribe of Judah. In the law of Moses, it says nothing about the tribe of Judah being priests. So what's being explained to them is that he arose from the order of Melchizedek, or in the same way that Melchizedek was priest, and not in the way that Aaron was priest. So we don't have to look to the Torah to see how the earthly priests were priests to see if Yeshua can be a priest. Because predating that in the Torah is that Melchizedek was a priest. Yeshua can be priest in the same way as Melchizedek, and that's a change that comes from the Torah. This is clearer still. If another priest arises according to the similitude of Melchizedek, so a different word is used here. It's not according to the order of, it's another word which means the same thing, a synonym, which is translated in a way that is perhaps easier to understand, according to the similitude of Melchizedek, or in the like of Melchizedek. In the likeness of. Verse 16 says, who has become not according to the Torah of fleshly command, but according to the power of an endless life. Speaking of Yeshua. For he does witness, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. So Yeshua, an endless life, that's witnessed to in the scriptures before the New Testament, saying, in Psalm 110, it says this, you are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. So you're going to be a priest in the same way that Melchizedek was a priest. For there is indeed a setting aside of the former command because of its weakness and unprofitableness. Does that mean that the Torah is weak and unprofitable? No. It means that men were subject to death. They weren't men that lived forever, and they would come and they would go. When they died, another priest was risen up in his father's place. But that's not necessary with Yeshua. So he didn't come according to the order of Aaron, as the Torah said, priests should be Levites and of the order of Aaron. Rather, he was called in the same way that Melchizedek was, and his life was endless. He would not die. So verse 19 explains this and says, for the Torah perfected naught, nothing, but the bringing in of a better expectation through which we draw near to Elohim. Okay, the better expectation, Ephesians 2:12-13, that at that time you were without Messiah, excluded from the citizenship of Israel, strangers from the covenants of promise, having no expectation, without Elohim in the world. But now in Messiah Yeshua, you who were once far off have been brought near. So this is the better expectation through which we draw near to Elohim. Okay, so the Torah perfected nothing. As we're going to see, the Torah and the sacrifice of animals and the blood of animals sufficed only to cleanse our flesh. Okay, the things that we saw in the earthly tabernacle, they were all about your flesh being clean. Okay, Yeshua and his sacrifice, that was all about our conscience being clean before Elohim. So you can make your flesh as clean as you want, but unless your conscience is clean before Elohim, you have not been perfected. This isn't saying the Torah is bad. It's saying that we needed something more than the earthly tabernacle to become perfected. But the bringing in of a better expectation through which we draw near to Elohim. And it was not without an oath. For they indeed became priests without an oath, but he became priest with an oath. So they were priests just by virtue of their lineage, their genealogy. Yeshua became priest because it had been promised to him in the scriptures. To the Hebrews, this would have been an amazing revelation. They would have said, of course, yeah, of course the Torah cleanses the flesh. All things are cleansed by blood in the Torah. We can't be perfected as pertains to our consciences, though. The Torah never says that. The priests just became priests by the fact that they were Levites. Yeshua, it was promised to him in the Psalms that he would become a priest by an oath. All of these things would start making sense of certain things which were perhaps a mystery to them in the scriptures. An oath by him who said, Yahovah has sworn and shall not regret, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Again, Psalm 110. By as much as this, Yeshua has become a guarantor of a better covenant. Indeed, those that became priests were many, because they were prevented by death from continuing. So Yeshua's priesthood is better. The weakness of the old command of how to elect priests was that it was dealing with men who were going to die. So those that became priests were many because they were prevented by death from continuing. With Yeshua, we don't need a continual stream of priests because he comes after the power of an endless life. Verse 24 says, but he, because he remains forever, has an unchangeable priesthood. So when they were called after the order of Aaron, there were loads of them because men die. He, remaining forever, in other words, being an endless life, has an unchangeable priesthood. That's better, that we have someone who is eternal and sinless, who doesn't need to offer for their own sins, who can serve in the heavenly tabernacle and perfect us. Hebrews 8, 1-10 says, now the summary of what we are saying is, okay, so you want to know what the summary of the book of Hebrews is? It's given in chapter 8. The summary of what we are saying is, we have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the greatness in the heavens, and who serves in the set-apart place and of the true tent which Yahovah set up and not men. Okay, so the one on the earth is patterned after the heavenly one. One in heaven, Yahovah set up when he created the heavens and the earth. Man set up the one on the earth. The one in heaven is better. Verse 3 says, for every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices, so it was also necessary for this one to have somewhat to offer. So if he's going to be a priest, he's going to need something to offer, like the priests on the earth did. For indeed, if indeed, rather, he were on earth, he would not be a priest, since there are priests who offer gifts according to the Torah. Okay, so if Yeshua was on the earth, which he will be in the millennial kingdom, he wouldn't be a priest. We have priests, and in the millennial kingdom, we're told that the Levites will serve in the temple. Verse 5 says, who serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly. So the ones on earth serve a copy of the place where Yeshua is. As Moshe was warned when he was about to make the tent, and we'll see that coming in the book of Exodus. For he said, see that you make all according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. But now he has obtained a more excellent service, inasmuch as he is also mediator of a better covenant, which was constituted on better promises. We saw the promises that the people made at the beginning of this part. All that Yahovah has or will say, we will do. That was their promise. We know that they didn't keep it. This covenant is established on better promises by people who have the law written on their hearts. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then no place would have been sought for a second. So if they'd said, we'll do all that Yahovah said, and then they'd done that, all well and good. We don't need the second covenant. But they didn't. For finding fault with them, not with the covenant, not with the Torah, the fault was with them. He says, the days are coming, says Yahovah, when I shall conclude with the house of Israel, and with the house of Yehudah, a new covenant. And that's what Yeshua did in his blood. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Mitzrayim, because they did not continue in my covenant, and I disregarded them, says Yehovah. Because this is the covenant that I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yehovah, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write them upon their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. So he's explaining to the Hebrews, using a passage out of Jeremiah. He's saying, look, this is what Jeremiah said. He said, I'm going to make a new covenant. That's what Yeshua did. He is now high priest, but not in contravention to the Torah, in agreement with the Torah. So all of the Hebrews would have had their minds blown by the book of Hebrews. Hebrews 9:13-20. For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling the defiled, that's those who are unclean, set apart for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Messiah, who through the everlasting Spirit offered himself unblemished to Elohim, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim. So again to the Hebrews it's written, you had these things, they cleansed your flesh. They didn't perfect you though. You need something else to perfect you. The tabernacle was patterned after the one in heaven. That's where Yeshua serves. It is according to Torah that he is a high priest, and now his blood cleanses your consciences. This again would have blown the minds of the people to whom the letter was written. Because of this, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that death, having taken place for the redemption of transgressions under the first covenant, those who are called might receive the promise of the everlasting inheritance. Remember, people like David, people like Abraham, okay, they are all to be accepted into the kingdom. David was in the first covenant. He needs Yeshua's sacrifice as much as anyone else. So for the redemption of transgressions under the first covenant, those people who are faithful to Yahovah under the first covenant, even though they committed transgressions, can still be perfected by the blood of Yeshua. Obviously, we were never under the first covenant. For where a covenant is, it is necessary for the death of the covenant offering to be established. So every time we see a covenant being made, we see an animal losing its life, blood being shed to establish that covenant. Yeshua shed his blood, as he said, to establish the new covenant. For a covenant over those dead is firm, since it is never valid while the covenant offering is living. Therefore, not even the first covenant was instituted without blood. And we'll see that as we go on. Perhaps in the Torah portion next week, or the one after that. For when, according to Torah, every commandment had been spoken by Moshe to all the people, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled the book itself on all the people. So when there's a covenant made with the people, blood needs to be shed. The first covenant, blood was shed. The letter to the Hebrews is explaining to the Hebrews, Yeshua's blood was shed because something needs to die, to make a covenant. And Moshe said, this is the blood of the covenant which Elohim commanded you. Just as Yeshua said, this is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. In the same way, he sprinkled with blood both the tent and all the vessels of the service. And according to the Torah, almost all is cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. So all that shedding of blood was for the cleansing of the flesh. But that didn't perfect anything. We needed Yeshua's blood to be shed to cleanse our consciences before Elohim. It was necessary then that the copies of the heavenly ones should be cleansed with these, but the heavenly ones themselves with better sacrifices than these. So the things on the earth were copies of the heavenly tabernacle. They were cleansed with earthly things. It is fitting that the heavenly tabernacle be cleansed with Yeshua's blood, with a better sacrifice. For Messiah has not entered into a set-apart place made by hand, figures of the true, but into heaven itself. Earthly priests entered into the copies, Yeshua enters into heaven, now to appear in the presence of Elohim on our behalf. Not that he should offer himself often, as the high priest enters into the set-apart place year by year with blood not his own. So on the earth, the high priest entered into the set-apart place, the Holy of Holies, year by year. Yeshua doesn't need to do that. He can offer once for all. But he serves a different purpose than the ones that are on the earth. He's for the cleansing of the conscience. For if so, he would have to suffer often. If he was going to enter in year by year, he would have to suffer again and again and again. Since the foundation of the world, but now he has appeared once for all at the end of the ages to put away sin by the offering of himself. And as it awaits men to die once, and after this the judgment, so also the Messiah, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, shall appear a second time apart from sin to those waiting for him unto deliverance. And this is at the end of the age, when he will appear in the fulfillment of Yom Kippur, the cleansing of the people of Israel, when Yeshua returns and destroys the nations. Hebrews 10 says, for the Torah, having a shadow of the good matters to come, and not the image itself of the matters, was never able to make perfect those who draw near with the same sacrifices which they offer continually year by year. Again, the Torah, the system on the earth, was never able to perfect you. Doesn't mean that it's not good. It just means that it won't cleanse your conscience. Otherwise, would they not have ceased to be offered? Because those who served, once cleansed, would have no more consciousness of sins. So if they perfected you, they cleansed your conscience, they would only need to be offered once. The ones on the earth, though, only cleanse the flesh. So they need to be offered time and again. Verse 3 says, but in those offerings is a reminder of sins year by year. For it is possible for blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. All it can do is cleanse you from the uncleanness. Therefore, coming into the world, he says, sacrifice and meal offering you did not desire, but a body you have prepared for me. This is Yeshua. You don't want sacrifices for sin. You want sin to be dealt with. In burnt offerings and offerings from sin, you did not delight. Why? Because what they necessitate is that sin has taken place. So Yehovah doesn't want loads of sin offerings. What he wants is for people to repent from sin, to be cleansed by the blood of Yeshua, and to be complete before him. Then I said, see, I come. In the volume of the book, it kind of means in the majority of the book, it has been written concerning me to do your will, O Elohim, saying above, sacrifice and meal offering and burnt offerings and offerings for sin you did not desire nor delighted in, which are offered according to the Torah. Then he said, see, I come to do your will, O Elohim. He takes away the first to establish the second. By that will, we have been set apart through the offering of the body of Yeshua Messiah once for all. And indeed, every priest stands day by day doing service, repeatedly offering the same sacrifices, which are never able to take away sins. So yes, Yehovah instituted the temple on the earth. It will be there again in the kingdom. But they can do as many sacrifices as they want. They will never be able to achieve what Yeshua's sacrifice achieves for us. But he, having offered one sacrifice for sins for all time, sat down at the right hand of Elohim, waiting from that time onward until his enemies are made a footstool for his feet. For by one offering he is perfected for all time those who are being set apart. And the set apart Spirit also witnesses to us. For after having said before, this is the covenant I make with them, after those days, says Yehovah, giving my laws into their hearts, and in their minds I shall write them, and their sins and their lawlessnesses I shall remember no more. Their conscience will be clean before me. And where there is forgiveness of these, there is no longer a sacrifice for sin. So, brothers, having boldness to enter into the set-apart place by the blood of Yeshua, by a new and living way which he instituted for us, through the veil which is his flesh, and having a high priest over the house of Elohim, let us draw near with a true heart in completeness of belief, having our hearts sprinkled from a wicked conscience, which the previous sacrifices couldn't do, and our bodies washed with clean water. Let us hold fast the confession of our expectation without yielding, for he who promises is trustworthy. Let us be concerned for one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging and so much more as you see the day coming. So this is why we're to assemble together, to be able to encourage one another and say, let's not sin. If you sin, then there's going to be no more forgiveness of sins. Let's assemble together, encourage one another, and love one another. So Isaiah speaks of a time when priests will be in the millennial kingdom. It says, the Spirit of the Master Yehovah is upon me, because Yehovah has anointed me to bring good news to the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim release to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yehovah and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all who mourn, to appoint unto those who mourn in Sion, to give them the embellishment for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, and they shall be called trees of righteousness, a planting of Yehovah to be adorned. And they shall rebuild the old ruins, raise up the former wastes, and they shall restore the ruined cities and the wastes of many generations. Strangers shall stand and feed your flocks. The sons of the foreigner be your plowmen and your vine dressers. But you shall be called priests of Yehovah, servants of our Elohim. Shall be said of you, you shall consume the strength of the Gentiles and boast in their esteem. Instead of your shame and reproach, they rejoice a second time in their portion. Therefore they take possession a second time in their land. Everlasting joy is theirs. For I, Yehovah, love justice. I hate robbery for burnt offering, and I shall give their rewards in truth, make an everlasting covenant with them. Their seed shall be known among the Gentiles, and their offspring in the midst of the peoples. All who see them shall acknowledge them, that they are the seed Yehovah has blessed. And that will, Yah willing, be us. So we started with the idea that we are priests. We're called to be priests. We've seen in the millennial kingdom it said, you shall be priests. So how are we priests if we're not priests in the order of Melchizedek? If we're not priests serving in the heavenly tabernacle with Yeshua as our high priest? Okay, this is from Gesenius's Hebrew Chaldee lexicon. Okay, it says here, to presage, to predict, the art of augury, a prophet, a soothsayer, often used among the heathen. That's why we see Yitro is a priest of Midian. So you can be a priest, not necessarily a good priest, but you can do those same actions on the behalf of Yehovah. And that is what we are called to do as priests of Yehovah. Okay? He who stands up in anyone's matter. So for us to be priests, we stand up on the behalf of Yehovah in his matter, what he has given us in his word. That's incidentally what the priests serving in the tabernacle were also doing. They were doing what Yehovah had said to do, how Yehovah wanted them to represent him on the earth. Okay? The signification of priest is kindred, inasmuch as prophets and priests were alike supposed to intercede between the gods and men. So you can have pagan priests, and you can have those doing the same for Yehovah. I'm looking for riches, abundance, glory, in which ideas are secondary and appear to be deduced from the condition of the priests. Okay, so all of this is about representing Yehovah. We as priests of Yehovah, people should be able to take from us who Yehovah is. We're representing Elohim, representing Yehovah to other people. We're doing his word. We're showing people who he is. Okay, so you can be a priest, you can be a priest of pagan gods, or you can be a priest standing up to do what Yehovah has asked you to do. So we are priests. We are a nation of priests to Yehovah. We stand up on his behalf and represent him to the world. But that doesn't mean that we're all in a priestly order and we're in the order of Melchizedek. For further understanding on this, like, well, if we're priests, what sacrifices do we give? I will point people to this Torah portion. I also go through the book of Hebrews in a different way in this Torah portion, and there's many other things in this, like the new temple in Jerusalem. Is that going to be a good thing? Should we be going there? Should the priests on earth be about at this time? All sorts of stuff, the sacrifices that we offer. I will point people to this Torah portion. It's over 5 hours long, but it's all good information. Also, if you want to know how we make atonement and how being priests makes atonement for our own spiritual uncleanness, I will point you to this Torah portion and the same Torah portion in a different year here. Point you to this to understand how there are 3 temples. So there's not just the one on earth, not just the one in heaven, but there's also the temple that we serve in as priests. If you want more information on that, check out this Torah portion. And to understand being unclean, both in terms of your flesh, your conscience, and your spirit, and how you can be cleansed of that uncleanness, I would recommend this Torah portion to you. I think that I probably will come back in the third part and teach on that. What time is it at the moment?
It is 5 to 6.
6. Okay, we'll come back at 6:30 the next hour. So 6:30 if you're in the UK.